At Grandpa's funeral, my cousins got the yacht, the penthouse, and his multi-million company. I was given a wrinkled envelope. Mocking laughter filled the room. Inside was just a ticket to Rome. When I landed, a driver held a sign with my name. His 6 words left me stunned. My name is Isabelle Harper, and I'm about to tell you how the worst day of my life became the beginning of everything I never knew I needed. But first, let me introduce you to the players in this game my grandfather orchestrated from beyond the grave. There was Dominic, my older cousin, standing there in his $5,000 Tom Ford suit, already practicing his CEO speech for the company employees. His sister, Natasha, was barely hiding her excitement behind her Chanel sunglasses, probably planning which Instagram filter would best capture her new yacht. Their parents, my Uncle Bradford and Aunt Vivian, stood like vultures who'd finally found their feast, Bradford's hand already reaching for the papers the lawyer was holding. And then there was me, the middle school English teacher who drove 4 hours in a Toyota Camry that needed new tires just to say goodbye to the only person in this family who ever really saw me. Grandfather Theodore built an empire from nothing, turned a single textile factory into Harper Manufacturing Industries, and everyone wanted their piece of his kingdom. Everyone except me. I just wanted 5 more minutes to play Scrabble with the old man who taught me that the most powerful words are the ones nobody expects you to know. That funeral wasn't just about saying goodbye to Theodore Harper. It was the day I learned that sometimes the smallest gift carries the biggest secret, and sometimes the people laughing at you are standing on ground that's about to crumble beneath their feet. My alarm went off at 6 a.m. every weekday, just like it had for the past 7 years since I started teaching at Lincoln Middle School in Philadelphia. The ceiling in my studio apartment had the same crack I'd been staring at for 4 years, shaped like the Liberty Bell if you squinted hard enough. My neighbor's cat was already meowing right on schedule, and I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez starting her morning routine through the paper-thin walls. This was my life, predictable, modest, and completely different from the world I'd grown up in. You see, being a Harper meant something in certain circles. It meant country clubs and prep schools, summer cottages, and trust funds. But for me, it meant choosing between paying rent and fixing my car's exhaust system, because I'd walked away from all of that to teach 12-year-olds about Shakespeare and poetry. My mother, Diane, understood that choice. She was the only one who ever did. Mom died when I was 16, breast cancer that took her in 6 brutal months. Before she passed, she worked as a social worker at Philadelphia General, helping families navigate the system. She'd spent her whole life being the compassionate one, the generous one, the one who never complained when Bradford took credit for Theodore's affection. The last thing she ever said to me was, "Evelyn, don't let them turn you into something you're not. Your grandfather shaped me into what he needed, and look where it got me." 3 weeks later, she was gone. Grandfather Theodore was a contradiction wrapped in a cashmere overcoat. He built Harper Manufacturing from a single textile machine he bought with his military discharge pay after the Korean War. By the time I was born, he owned factories in 8 states, warehouses in 15 cities, and enough money to buy whatever he wanted. But here's the thing about my grandfather: he didn't believe in giving. He believed in earning. Every birthday card came with a $20 bill and a note that said, "Make it mean something." Every Christmas gift was something practical, like books about business strategy or subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal. The only time Grandfather Theodore seemed genuinely interested in me was during our Sunday Scrabble games. It started when I was 11, right after I'd won my school's spelling bee. He showed up at our apartment one Sunday afternoon, set up the board, and said, "Show me what you've learned." I played the word quest for 32 points. He came back the next Sunday, and the next, and eventually those games became the one constant between us. "You play like your mother," he told me once, "too focused on making everyone else comfortable, not focused enough on winning the game." "Maybe I don't want to win if it means crushing everyone else," I replied. He actually smiled at that, the first real smile I'd ever seen from him. "Maybe that's why you're the only one who still interests me, Evelyn." Dominic and Natasha never understood those Scrabble games. Dominic was too busy shadowing grandfather at the office, learning about supply chains and profit margins. He'd gotten his MBA from Stanford, grandfather's alma mater, and never let anyone forget it. Every family dinner turned into Dominic's personal presentation about operational efficiency and market expansion. He spoke in corporate jargon and quarterly reports, turning every conversation into a boardroom pitch. Natasha took a different approach. She turned herself into an influencer, chronicling her life as the manufacturing heiress on social media. 300,000 followers watched her pose in various designer outfits at various luxury destinations. She called it building her personal brand, but really she was just spending grandfather's money while waiting for more. Her biggest achievement was getting verified on Instagram and dating a venture capitalist who owned a tech startup. Bradford and Vivienne, Dominic and Natasha's parents, were the ultimate power couple in the most superficial way possible. Bradford had worked his way up to Chief Operating Officer of Harper Manufacturing, though most of the actual work was done by his team. Vivienne spent her time organizing charity auctions, not because she cared about the causes, but because she liked seeing her name in the Philadelphia lifestyle magazines. They lived in a house so enormous, they had separate wings for different seasons. And then there was me, teaching 42 seventh graders about metaphors and poetry, grading essays at a kitchen table I'd found on Craigslist, and feeling more fulfilled than any of them could imagine. The Merion Cricket Club had never felt more suffocating than it did that November afternoon. Grandfather Theodore had specifically requested his will be read here, in the same mahogany-paneled room where he'd negotiated his biggest deals over bourbon and imported cigars. The walnut table reflected our faces like a dark mirror, and I could see Dominic adjusting his Patek Philippe watch for the 4th time in 10 minutes. We'd just come from the cemetery, where the autumn rain had turned the burial into a muddy ordeal that Vivienne complained about the entire drive over. Before we begin, Mr. Lancaster, the family attorney, adjusted his tortoiseshell glasses and cleared his throat. I want you all to know that Theodore was very specific about these arrangements. He reviewed this will 2 weeks before his passing. Bradford leaned forward, his hands already forming fists of anticipation. We understand, Lancaster. Theodore discussed the succession plan with me extensively. That was a lie, and everyone knew it. Grandfather never discussed business outside the boardroom, and he certainly never promised anything to anyone. But Bradford had been telling everyone who'd listened that he was taking over as CEO, that Dominic would be his right hand, and that the family legacy was secure. Let's proceed, then. Lancaster opened the leather portfolio. To my son, Bradford Harper, and his wife Vivienne, I leave the estate in Martha's Vineyard and the investment portfolio contained an account ending in 6793. Vivienne grabbed Bradford's arm, her emerald bracelet catching the light. The Vineyard house. Oh, Bradford, he did remember how much we loved summers there. To my grandson, Dominic Harper, Lancaster continued, I leave Harper Manufacturing Industries and all its operational assets, with the condition that he maintains current employment levels for at least 18 months. Dominic stood up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. I knew it. I won't let you down, grandfather. He was already pulling out his phone, probably to update his LinkedIn profile to CEO. To my granddaughter, Natasha Harper, I leave the penthouse on Rittenhouse Square and the yacht, Serendipity, currently docked in Newport. Natasha let out a squeal that could have shattered the crystal chandelier. The penthouse? Oh my God, do you know what that's worth? And the yacht? My followers are going to absolutely die. Mr. Lancaster turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like sympathy. And to my granddaughter, Evelyn Harper, I leave this. He pulled out a small white envelope, worn at the corners, my name written across it in grandfather's shaky handwriting. The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds before Dominic started laughing. Are you serious? Dominic's voice cracked with amusement. That's it? An envelope. I took it with steady hands, though my heart was pounding against my ribs. The paper felt thin, insignificant. Inside was a single plane ticket. Rome. One way. Departing in 48 hours. Let me guess. Dominic snatched the ticket from my hand before I could stop him. Economy class. Oh, this is priceless. The teacher gets a vacation. Natasha was already recording on her phone. This is actually hilarious, Evelyn. Your face right now. Don't worry, maybe he left you some frequent flyer miles too. Bradford stood up, straightening his tie with the authority of someone who just won everything. Theodore always said you lacked the killer instinct for business, Evelyn. At least he gave you something nice. Rome is beautiful this time of year. It's probably his way of saying goodbye, Vivienne added, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. A little trip to help you process everything. How thoughtful. My father, who'd been silent in the corner, Theodore's youngest son who worked as an accountant for a non-profit, finally spoke. Is that everything, Mr. Lancaster? That concludes the distribution of assets, Lancaster replied, closing the portfolio. There is a personal letter for Evelyn to be opened only upon her arrival in Rome. A letter? Dominic was practically howling now. What's he going to say? Sorry you're broke? Enjoy the pasta. Dominic, enough, Bradford said, though he was smiling. Evelyn chose her path. She wanted to be a teacher, and Theodore respected that enough to give her a parting gift. We should all be grateful for what we've received. I looked at the ticket again. November 18th, 2:15 p.m. arrival. Alitalia Flight 63. Why so specific? Why Rome? Grandfather had never mentioned Italy in all our years of Scrabble games. He'd talked about Hong Kong, London, Berlin, but never Rome. Well, I stood up, sliding the ticket back into the envelope. I guess I'd better pack. You're actually going? Natasha looked genuinely surprised. You're going to use your sick days to take a random trip to Rome? Your grandfather gave me a ticket, I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn. The least I can do is use it. Bradford shook his head. Sentimental fool, just like your mother. Diane never understood that emotion has no place in business either. That's when I knew I was definitely getting on that plane, because Bradford was wrong about my mother, wrong about me, and maybe, just maybe, wrong about what grandfather had really left me. The ticket weighed nothing in my pocket, but somehow it felt heavier than all the millions they'd just inherited. As I walked out of that club, their laughter following me to the parking lot, I remembered grandfather's last words to me during our final Scrabble game. The best moves, Evelyn, are the ones your opponent never sees coming. The rain had stopped, and for the first time that day, the sun broke through the clouds. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the plane ticket while my laptop displayed my bank account balance, $1,432. My rent was due in 6 days. My car needed new tires. I had 42 essays on the civil rights movement to grade. Every logical part of my brain screamed that flying to Rome was insane. But I couldn't stop thinking about grandfather's face during our last Scrabble game, just 3 weeks before he died. He'd been different that day, softer somehow, like he'd finally stopped playing a role he'd been performing for decades. Evelyn, he'd said, playing the word faith for 22 points, what do you know about trust? It's earned, not given, I'd responded, the same answer he'd drilled into all of us since childhood. No, child. Real trust is knowing when to follow without understanding why. Your mother knew that. She trusted me with something once, something precious, and I failed her. But you, Evelyn, you're different. You don't want anything from me. I never have, grandfather. I know. That's why when the time comes, you'll trust me, even when everyone else thinks you're a fool. Now, holding that ticket, his words felt less like a memory and more like a message. I picked up my phone and called my father. I'm going, I said as soon as he answered. I knew you would, Dad replied without hesitation. Your grandfather called me last month. He didn't say much, just that I should support whatever decision you made after the funeral. Dad, this is crazy. I can't afford to miss work. I have responsibilities. Evelyn, your mother once told me that Theodore wasn't always the man we knew. She said there was a before and after in his life, and we only knew the after. Maybe this is about the before. I spent the next morning at Lincoln Middle arranging for a substitute teacher. My principal, Mrs. Wallace, wasn't thrilled about the sudden request, but I'd never taken a sick day in 7 years, so she grudgingly approved 4 days off. For days to fly to Rome and figure out what game my grandfather was playing. Ms. Harper, are you okay? Asked Cameron, one of my brightest students, after my last class. You seem different today. Just thinking about history, Cameron, how sometimes the most important moments look like nothing when they're happening. I packed light, 1 carry-on bag with 3 changes of clothes and my mother's old leather-bound journal that I'd carried since her funeral. The Uber to Philadelphia International Airport cost me $38 I couldn't spare, but I was already committed to this insanity. At the gate, waiting to board, I pulled out the envelope again. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner, barely visible, was a tiny number written in pencil. 1952, the year grandfather would have been 24, the year after he'd left the military. The flight attendant called my boarding group, and I got in line behind a couple arguing about their carry-on luggage. Normal people with normal problems, not wondering why their dead grandfather had sent them on a mysterious journey across the Atlantic. I found my seat, 28C, middle seat near the back of the plane. Of course Dominic had been right about it being economy. The woman to my left was already asleep. The man to my right had claimed both armrests and was watching a movie on his tablet without headphones. As the plane lifted off, Philadelphia shrinking below us, I thought about Dominic, probably already in grandfather's office, sitting in his chair, feeling like a king. Natasha was definitely posting sunset photos from the yacht by now. Bradford and Vivian were probably meeting with wealth managers about their newfound fortune. And here I was, cramped in economy, flying toward a mystery with money I didn't have to spare. But something felt right about it. The wheels touched down at Rome's Fiumicino airport at exactly 2:19 p.m. local time. My legs were cramped, my back ached, and I'd barely slept during the 9-hour flight. The Italian announcements mixed with English as we taxied to the gate, and suddenly the reality hit me. I was in Rome with no hotel reservation, no plan, and no idea what I was supposed to do next. Immigration was a blur of stamps and questions. Purpose of visit? The officer asked in accented English. I honestly don't know, I replied, too tired to lie. He looked at me strangely but stamped my passport anyway. Welcome to Italy. I followed the crowd toward baggage claim, even though I only had my carry-on. The arrivals hall was chaos. Families reuniting, drivers holding signs for business travelers, tourists looking lost with their maps. I was about to head for the exit when I saw it, a professionally printed sign reading Isabelle Harper, held by a man in an expensive charcoal suit. My heart stopped. I approached cautiously. I'm Isabelle Harper. The driver's face lit up with relief. Ms. Harper, finally. Please come quickly. His English was heavily accented but clear. Who sent you? Your grandfather arranged everything months ago. My name is Antonio. Please, we have a long drive. He took my bag before I could protest, and led me outside to a black BMW sedan that probably cost more than I made in 3 years. The November air was mild, nothing like Philadelphia's autumn chill. Antonio opened the rear door for me, and I slid onto leather seats that felt like butter. Where are we going? I asked as he pulled away from the curb. Villa Luminosa. 1 hour north in the Tuscan hills. I don't understand. My grandfather never mentioned any villa in Italy. Antonio met my eyes in the rearview mirror. Mr. Theodore, he owned the villa for 43 years. He visit every October, 1 week, always alone. 43 years. That would mean since 1982, when I was -6 years old. The math didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. We left Rome's sprawl behind, climbing into hills covered with olive groves and vineyards. The landscape was almost painfully beautiful, like something from a travel documentary about finding yourself in Tuscany. Antonio drove with Italian confidence, taking curves at speeds that made me grip the door handle. How did you know my grandfather? I asked. My father was his driver first. When Papa died, I take over. 17 years now. I drive Mr. Theodore when he come. 17 years of October visits that none of us knew about. What else had grandfather hidden? The road became narrower, winding through a small village where elderly men sat outside a cafe watching us pass. Then Antonio turned onto a private road lined with cypress trees. At the end, wrought iron gates opened automatically, revealing a villa that took my breath away. 2 stories of honey-colored stone, terraces overlooking endless vineyards, gardens that looked like they belonged in a Renaissance painting. Antonio parked in front of massive wooden doors that had to be centuries old. Before I could process what I was seeing, the doors opened and an elderly woman emerged. She was elegant in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with grace. Her silver hair pulled back in a simple twist, her eyes the same steel gray as grandfather's. She walked toward me slowly, tears streaming down her face, and I knew before Antonio said the words that changed everything. Evelyn, Antonio said softly, meet your grandmother, Isabelle Harper. The world tilted. I actually reached for the car to steady myself. That's impossible. My grandmother died before I was born. Isabelle reached me then, her hands taking mine, her grip surprisingly strong. Your American grandmother did die, Patricia, but I am very much alive. Her accent was musical, her English perfect but formal. She studied my face like she was memorizing it. You have his eyes, she whispered, but your mother's gentle heart. Come inside, Evelyn. There's so much to tell you. The villa's interior was understated elegance, nothing like the gaudy mansion Bradford and Vivian owned. Isabelle led me to a sitting room where the walls were covered with photographs. I saw my grandfather, young and laughing, standing in front of a small stone church. A wedding photo. Grandfather and Isabelle, both barely in their 20s, radiantly happy. We married in 1952, Isabelle said, watching me process everything. Theodore had come to Italy with the army, stayed after the war to help with reconstruction efforts. We met at a festival in Florence. He was so handsome, so full of ambition. We started with nothing, just a few acres of vines his commanding officer sold us for almost nothing. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter. This is from our vineyard. Luminosa, we call it light. The wine was extraordinary, complex and rich. I don't understand. Grandfather had a whole life here. More than a life, Cara. He had a family, me, our daughter Camilla, the grandchildren he never met because he chose America instead. He left you. The Korean War came. Theodore felt duty calling. He was supposed to be gone 6 months. Her voice carried no bitterness, just profound sadness. But he met your American grandmother while on leave. She was pregnant with Bradford. An honorable man would have divorced me, but Theodore couldn't bear to give up either life, so he kept both, separate, secret. My hands were shaking. He lived a complete lie. No, Evelyn. He lived 2 truths. He loved us both in different ways. The vineyard grew, became successful. He sent money, visited every year, but he couldn't choose, until now. She walked to an antique desk and pulled out a thick folder. Luminosa Vineyards International. 43 million in assets. It's all yours, Evelyn. He was very specific. Not Bradford, not Dominic. You. The documents Isabelle handed me were overwhelming. Deeds, contracts, bank statements, all proving that my grandfather had built an entirely separate empire on this side of the Atlantic. But what hit me hardest was the video she played on an old laptop, recorded just 6 weeks before grandfather died. His face filled the screen, and for the first time ever, he looked peaceful. Evelyn, if you're watching this, then you trusted me enough to take the flight. Good. You always were the only one who understood that some things matter more than money. Your cousins got what they always wanted from me, the appearance of success. But appearances can be deceiving. Harper Manufacturing has been hemorrhaging money for 4 years. I've hidden it in the books, but Dominic's about to inherit a disaster. The Penthouse has 2 mortgages. The yacht is leased. The Vineyard estate, the bank owns 65% of it. I gave them exactly what they showed me they valued, hollow prizes that look golden from the outside. He leaned closer to the camera. But you, Evelyn, you visited me every Sunday just to play Scrabble. Never asked for anything. Never angled for position. You chose teaching over money because you wanted purpose. So I'm giving you what you never asked for. Truth, family, and yes, wealth that's actually real. The vineyard produces 3 million bottles a year. The villa has been in Isabelle's family for 200 years. Your Aunt Camilla has been running operations, waiting to meet you. Your cousins Luca and Francesca are good people, raised right, nothing like Dominic and Natasha. This is your real inheritance, a family that values work, land that produces something real, and a legacy built on truth, not lies. He paused, that familiar sharp look returning to his eyes. Oh, and Evelyn, your next move is yours to make, but here's my advice. Dominic's going to call within 6 weeks, begging for help. Be kinder to him than he was to you. That's what makes you better. Checkmate, my dear girl. The screen went dark. Isabelle squeezed my shoulder gently. He talked about you constantly, she said. Every visit, stories about his granddaughter, the teacher who chose meaning over money. I spent 4 weeks in Italy, learning everything. Aunt Camilla looked so much like my mother it made my chest ache. She ran the Vineyard operations with quiet brilliance, never bitter about being the hidden daughter. Luca and Francesca, my Italian cousins, welcomed me like a sister returning from exile. They taught me about wine, about the land, about the grandfather they knew versus the one I knew. He was different here, Francesca told me one evening as we walked through the vines. Lighter. He'd work in the fields, hands in the soil, laughing. Not the businessman you knew. The call from Dominic came exactly 37 days later. I was back in Philadelphia, teaching my classes, when my phone rang at 11 p.m. Evelyn, it's Dominic. We need to talk. His voice had lost all its arrogance. The company's bankrupt. The auditors found everything. Dad's lost the house. Natasha's penthouse got foreclosed last week. It's all gone. I'm sorry, Evelyn. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. We were horrible to you. He paused, and I heard him struggling. Grandfather left you something real, didn't he? Yes. Good. You deserve it. You were the only one who actually loved him instead of his money. I made Dominic an offer the next day, manage the U.S. distribution for Luminosa wines. Salary, not ownership. He accepted immediately. Natasha took longer to swallow her pride, but eventually she came around too. She's actually talented at marketing when she's selling something. Real instead of just herself. She's engaged to Antonio's nephew now, living in Florence, learning the business from the ground up. Bradford and Vivian moved to a modest townhouse in Wilmington. Bradford found work as a financial consultant. Vivian got a position at Macy's. They don't speak to me, but Dominic says they're actually happier, forced to rely on each other instead of money. My father moved into the cottage on the California property I bought with my first distribution payment. He retired from accounting and spends his days volunteering, something he'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. And me? I still teach, but only part-time now. Summers the first spend in Italy, learning the wine business, getting to know the family I never knew existed. My students think it's amazing that their English teacher owns a vineyard. I use it to teach them about international business, agriculture, and family legacies. Last week, I was in the villa playing Scrabble with Aunt Camilla when she said something that stopped me cold. You know, your grandfather always said the winner isn't who scores the most points, but who knows which words really matter. I looked at the board, then at the vineyards through the window, then at the photo of grandfather on the wall, young and hopeful in 1952. He won, I said. It just took 60 years for the game to end. Camilla smiled. No, Evelyn. You won. You just didn't know you were playing. That crumpled envelope they all laughed at. It wasn't just a plane ticket. It was an invitation to discover who I really was, where I really came from, and what really mattered. My grandfather gave my cousins what they thought they wanted, and gave me what I didn't know I needed. The last bottle of wine grandfather personally produced sits in my Philadelphia apartment, unopened. The label says Luminosa 2024 and underneath, in his handwriting, for Evelyn, who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. Every Sunday, I still play Scrabble. Sometimes with Camilla in Italy, sometimes with my students in Philadelphia, sometimes alone, thinking about the old man who orchestrated the longest game I've ever seen. He taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in truth, family, and the courage to trust when nothing makes sense. Turns out the board everyone else was watching? That was just the distraction. The real game was happening on a completely different board, in a different country, in a different language. And grandfather made sure I was the only one who got an invitation to play.